my sort of base case bet will be that rupee depreciation is a risk. If you look at rupee's long-term chart, either it depreciates slowly every year, or there are periods when it is in a band for many years and then it suddenly depreciates. So now we have been in a band for again several years. Yeah. Between 73 and 75 and a half, we've been for many years. So all these factors point towards that there could be a pressure on the rupee, which is why IT services or any export-oriented companies, those are things which would be safer because you have a dollar hedge there.
That also means that fuel prices will rise because we import more than 80% of all the crude oil that we need, which means inflation is going to keep running away.
If you step back and look at the economy, there is plenty to be concerned about. I mean, that if you see, even pre-COVID, we had a lot of trouble because unemployment was at a 40-year high, even pre-COVID. There was like export growth, manufacturing growth, none of that was doing well even then. And since then, you had a decimation of the informal sector. So employment has been very poor. So it shows up in the kind of dichotomy that, for instance, IT services and related industries have done well. So the people who are in organized sector employment have been largely protected and have even done well. Whereas you have a whole lot of people moving down from the middle class to the lower middle class and from the lower middle class into the poor category. If you look at two-wheelers, for instance, in the April to December 2021, we have sold less two-wheelers than we sold 10 years ago. So we are like at a 10-year low, which is unthinkable. I mean, in every industry, this is something your viewers must think about, that any analyst talking about any company or industry always projects growth every year. No one ever projects a decline in any year. But actually, it is very, very difficult for companies to keep showing any profit growth every year. Very few companies can even manage that. So two-wheelers, if you look at real estate, also the high-end real estate is doing well. Whereas that is not the case lower down. So
it is what we keep talking about at Business Insider, Devina, the inequality, which we can either call it some segment of the real estate is growing, but the fact of the matter is the rich people are able to afford a lot of new things, but class and their own are not able to.
Yeah, four-wheeler versus two-wheeler, you'll see the same thing. That the higher-end cars are doing well, but two-wheelers, which shows that upward mobility is...
The guy who can buy an SUV is able to afford a new one. The guy who wants to buy an Alto doesn't have enough money.
The problem is that to make those things happen, the central government actually has very little tools and resources, right? These decisions are actually held at the state level, and states, frankly, aren't always bought in for these commitments that the central government puts out there. So let's talk about, the earlier COP summit where India laid out its initial target of 175 gigs by the end of 2022. Today, India is at 100 gigs. 75 gigs are not going to be inducted. And you can chalk it up to COVID and other things. But the fact of the matter is, you do see state governments continue to tear up contracts with private energy developers. If you look at the government's own website, the Propti website, in terms of arrears that are owed to private companies, it's been big before COVID, and it's even grown during COVID. So, I think the problem, we'll chalk it up to COVID and things, but a lot of the fundamentals about power reforms that are going to set the table for India to meet these commitments at the state level just are not happening. Now, the government is hoping to move an important Electricity Act amendments through Parliament, which would give the central government a little bit more authority in terms of pushing states. But as of right now, the central government shows up for these big summits. They put great commitments on the table, but state governments aren't always aligned, and state governments run and control the decisions that are going to make or break meeting these commitments. So good things on the table for sure. But gosh, watching what's happening in practice, it's a mixed bag. Some states are doing great. Rajasthan's exceeding its commitments. Gujarat and others are doing pretty well. And a lot of other states are really falling behind, and you don't see a track to improve. Even some BJP states. So sometimes we kind of expect that states that are aligned with Modi politically would get on board. That's not true. Sometimes BJP states are some of the worst laggards. Sometimes states that oppose Modi's agenda in other areas are the fastest to jump on board. So it's there's no one answer, I think, for how the pathway is going to be met.
you look at the gap, it can be explained by the simple fact that whereas in the earlier years we have been primarily looking at the medium term and the long term requirements of the defense forces, since the beginning of the border standoff with China in Ladakh, I think the focus has been on meeting the immediate operational needs, which is why whereas the earlier approach of the government was to actually look at the domestic defense industry to try and meet the operational the medium and long term needs. I think this time the focus has been on meeting the immediate needs, which cannot be, or I would say, to some extent, can only be fulfilled by the domestic defense industry. The bulk of it actually would have to be imported, which is why if you saw in the last few months, Rajnath Singh visiting Moscow and making an emergency purchase of the missiles as well as the fighter jets. So I think that has been one of the reasons why the government would be falling short in terms of meeting that target of the domestic defense production. So I think the focus would be I think the government has the confidence that probably it can tackle the China challenge on the continent. So if you look at land borders, I think the government is in a sense confident it can tackle the China challenge, but the sheer fact that it can match the Chinese presence with the Indian presence. So I think the focus this year at least will be on the maritime capabilities. We've already seen the both L&T and the Mazgaon dockyard being shortlisted as Indian strategic partners for building the next set of submarines. So after the Scorpion class submarines, we are going to build the next set of submarines, which is called as P-75I. And the government has insisted that all these will have an Indian partner, probably from the private sector, in collaboration with the foreign partner. So the focus will be on at least allotting some resources for that. We already have the sea trials going on for the first aircraft carrier. So the focus will be also on that, plus also augmenting the capabilities of the existing naval fleet, both in terms of the missiles as well as in terms of sensors and those kind of things.